I'm really happy to have Steve, Scoops, Thomas back on stage. First time was in PasswordsCon in Oslo in December 2012, so almost 10 years ago. A pretty fun experience and a good talk back then. He's also been with PasswordsCon several times before. And about Steve, I can say for certain that I understand maybe 2% of the stuff he's talking about because I basically suck at math and crypto. But I can also say that if you have anything that is using crypto that you intend to put online, if you haven't hired Steve to look into it first, to look for vulnerabilities, you're doing it wrong because he is incredibly good at finding vulnerabilities. And now it's Steve and bscrypt, a cache-hard password hash. So go ahead, Steve.
Just for clarification, that's crypto as in cryptography. Okay, so bscrypt, it's a new password hashing algorithm and KDF. So password hashing and password KDFs fall under this umbrella of key stretching. So key stretching can be used for other things like, so if you have a small key, you have something with like 30 bits of entropy and you want 40 bits of strength, you can stretch for 10 extra bits. You can use that for like fingerprints. So you can have a shorter fingerprint, but it's harder to make a collision or whatever. But we're only going to be talking about password key stretching in relationship to passwords. So key stretching. The first thing that people came up with was computationally hard. So what this is you just hash your password, then you hash that and over and over and over. And memory hard, you just use the resource of memory and you hash stuff and whatnot. Here are some algorithms. So PBKDF2, you may have heard of, maybe not. And there's Argon2, bscrypt, balloon hashing, which doesn't actually have like an official spec or anything like that. YesCrypt. So computationally hard, there's two subsections. One that I explained before where you hash the password, then you hash that, then you hash it again. It's a very sequential operation. So as a defender, I realized that I should probably, so it's like kind of a new algorithm. People are kind of afraid of it. But PBKDF2 has this foot gun where, so if you ask for, so PBKDF2 SHA-256, that's 32 bytes of, so SHA-256 is 32 bytes. If you ask for 32 bytes from PBKDF2, you run through all the iterations. But if you ask for any more, it will do all the iterations again, but with like a different counter at the top. So all those are done in parallel if you ask for a large amount of output. So this is the entire algorithm. You just ask for a large amount, and then you XOR each of the blocks together, and then you do that. This should, NIST should like fast track this into PBKDF3 or, something so that we can get something that's better than PBKDF2. At the end, you'll see a benchmark between this and other algorithms. And yeah. So this brings us to cache hard. This is relatively new. Basically, the difference between memory hard and cache hard. Memory hard reads like sequential blocks of memory. So you'll read like a kilobyte from memory randomly and then do something with it and then, whatnot. Cache hard, you want to do small, fast, random lookups. So you're looking up 8 bytes versus a kilobyte and doing a quick operation. So bcrypt, this is minimally cache hard. It was kind of accidentally cache hard because it used this encryption algorithm called Blowfish, which had 4K of S boxes. And we didn't know that, cache hard was a good thing until GPUs came out, and people were noticing that the speed to generate one of these hashes from a defender versus how slow they are for a GPU attacker, it was way better than other things. So bscrypt, that's what we're basically going to be talking about. Then pufferfish 2. Pufferfish was submitted to the password hashing competition, and then I forget exactly when it changed. I think it was in the tweaking round or something like that. But we'll also be comparing that. YesCrypt and Argon 2 DS. Those are memory hard algorithms that have this extra thing where they do some cache hard operations. You probably haven't heard of Argon 2 DS if you've heard of Argon 2, because this was actually created after the password hashing competition ended. I even keep forgetting about it. So we're basically just going to be talking about bscrypt and pufferfish 2. So how to do a password hashing, or how to do key stretching. Well, so what you want to do is hash all the inputs, then do some sort of work with that. So you generate the seed, then you do some amount of work, you generate this value called work, and then you just put it in a KDF and stretch it for whatever length. If it's a password hash, you probably want to have that be a fixed width of like 32 bytes. And if it's KDF, go whatever. So bcrypt, they didn't do that first step where you hash all the inputs. So what ended up happening is there's bugs with null characters where so a lot of the implementations are in C. They expect C strings, but if you give it UTF-16, then you have no password part. Then there were bugs where with Unicode characters and like UTF-8, where the sign got extended and cleared out parts of the password. But basically, this right here is Blowfish encryption. So the block right there, that's done like 16 times. S 0 through 3, those are S boxes. And so pufferfish made these changes to Blowfish. Also, Blowfish is 32-bit. All the variables are 32-bit, and these are 64-bit, so that you can have larger larger masks. So you can have larger S boxes. Also, the mask allowed for scaling the S boxes to, nice binary numbers of sizes. So like 64K, 128K, stuff like that. So in April 2019, before bscrypt was called bscrypt, I forget what it was called, but I was like, I don't really like how pufferfish was not using some of those bits to do lookups on. So I was like, I'll do 8-bit lookups and then just have, so this right here is 64K of S boxes. 16, did I say 64? Whatever. 16K of X boxes. And when you wanted to do 32 or some weird thing like 48 or, something multiple of 16, you just do 8 more S boxes. And then you just do a for loop around this to do multiple iterations. So what I didn't know was that CPUs were going to have weird sizes for cache, like 48K or 1.25 meg. So I tweeted out this benchmark in 2019, and so 2 different CPUs. One has only 2 layers of cache. One has 3. You can probably guess, but so what I noticed was the pink line, that one little dot, it came, that was at, quote, 256K, which is the cache size, the L2 cache size for 1 core. on that, and I noticed a jump, and I was like, oh, that's weird. So I realized that it was the P boxes, because I think I actually was using multiple P boxes permutation. S box is a substitution box. It's like a cryptographic term, whatever. Anyway, so I removed those because we're not using this for encryption, and that's like where the key bits were and stuff. So because the only part about this being cache hard are these S boxes. So removing those, it then didn't got rid of that little bump before when you are at that limit. Later, I was like, you know what? I should switch to accumulators, because the only thing that matters is that you're alternating XOR and add. So you just do lookups and then XOR or add into the accumulators like this. But there are some issues with them. Like if it's 0 and then if your accumulator is 0, which is 1 in 2 to the 64, so very rare, so it doesn't really matter. But if you add a value and then you XOR the same value, it'll be 0. Basically, I was thinking of having just like one S box that I scaled, because you could actually do that with an accumulator, but it's possible to read the same variable twice. So if you did that with a non-zero value, then the least significant bit stays the same, which is also not really a big deal. So I was looking at different sizes for masks, how many lookups I could do, and like what the limits were and whatnot. And so then I had like a aha moment. So I have two S boxes that are overlapping, and you can shift them over to get those weird cache sizes. So now I can hit like any size you really wanted within a 8-byte boundary. Granted, the way that I did things, it makes it nice for like 128-byte boundaries. And then I really like how easy it is to read the settings and know what they mean. So I just made it kilobyte boundaries. So the M parameter, if you see 256, that's 256K and whatnot. So it makes it nice and easy to understand. So the largest size that I could do with these overlapping S boxes, where a special case where they're totally separate for the largest size, would be these values. And so obviously 4K, that's kind of bad. And 64-bit masks, that's kind of excessive. So I got rid of those. And then I was looking and I'm like, well, a megabyte, that's kind of low. So, and then depending on whether you wanted to push out into L3 cache, some CPUs have more than 32 megs now. So I guess this one wins. So this is the main operation. Basically, all right, so green and blue, you can basically consider those like L1, L0 through L3, and then R0 through R3. Anyway, so the reason why I do 4 of these in parallel is password crackers for bcrypt, what they did was they interleaved two password, they interleaved two bcrypt hashes with 2 different passwords, and you got like a slight speed bump because it was hiding latency a little bit better. So I wanted to do that, but now these operations are just parallel. So I do a block of that, then I rotate them, and then I rotate them again and again. So it's basically 4 blocks of this, and it mixes all the all the different ones that are done in parallel, and this is basically a free. Well, it is a free operation. And then I just read sequentially, and then I also do a rotate again when you write, and again, rotating them at the end, it doesn't really matter too much, but it's free. So following A, an accumulator variable A, you get the add XOR and then the S boxes. Oh, I never noticed that. Oh, whatever. Oops. Add XOR in the S boxes, and then XOR, and then add. So this was a version I had before. Then I realized that those two values could be the same. So I'd be accumulating with add twice. So I then changed it so that you have a block that starts with adding, and then every other, and then a block that starts with XOR, and then every other. So when you look at what's being accumulated, it's always add XOR, add XOR, add XOR, and then what you're writing, add XOR, so on. So those are two different blocks. Then I rotate all the values. This is what made me, so remember when I said that I didn't like how some of those bits weren't being used for lookups? Well, when you rotate the variables, those bits that aren't being used will then later be used in other other lookups. And all I did was do A through D after the first block, and then E through H after the next. So initial fill and finish, I'm pretty sure you're all bored with code, so you can go look it up if you want. But basically, I used Blake2B for the hashing of inputs and the KDF at the end to expand it. And you might be wondering why I used Blake2B instead of like Blake3. Well, Blake2B is 64-bit and Blake3 is 32-bit. So I wanted to basically have a native write function and like a native read. So it doesn't have to do any byte endian swaps or anything like that. So it basically just deals with only 64-bit integers. And then the finish is really simple. I just run over the entire data by adding and XORing like 16 in parallel. And then, combine, do some, stuff. So where can you find this code? Well, it is, let's hope this works. It is on GitHub as soon as this finishes. Yeah, there we go. So, this could be you. I bet no one knows that I was there when bscrypt was released. All right, so benchmarks. PBKDF2, SHA-256, SHA-512, bcrypt, and bscrypt. So the settings for all three of these were set to what a GPU attacker could do for bcrypt cost 9, because that was the one that you couldn't have as much leeway with the settings. So it's basically 53 kilohashes per second per GPU. And so as a defender, you can spend almost 800 milliseconds doing PBKDF2 SHA-256, or you could spend 4 milliseconds running bscrypt. So, so this is on actually this laptop. I realized that I should have, I thought of the slide last night, and I was like, ooh, I need to get a benchmark so I can do this. But yeah. Pufferfish 2 isn't on this, multiple reasons. I didn't have the code. And 2, the settings are also not as forgivable. Like, Jeremy wanted to have it such that, he had a T cost and an M cost, which were 2 to the whatever that value is, like bcrypt did. So it'd be hard to get an exact comparison. But, okay. So this is, again, this laptop. So it only has 3 megs of L3 cache. And if you look at the green line, bscrypt p = 2. So this is with 2 threads. So it's running on 2 cores with 2 megs of cache each. So it's actually now pushing into memory, which, as you can see, gets a lot slower. Basically, oh, right. So Pufferfish 2 fast. Basically, what Pufferfish does after every round of encrypting, encrypting all the S boxes, it hashes all of those. So it has to run through them with HMAC SHA-512 to hash them all, which is a slow operation, and it's not exactly helping its cache hardness. So it then gets a little bit faster for the Defender. So different CPU. This one has 6 megs of L3 cache, and for bscrypt P4, the last 2 are now hitting memory. So the nice thing about it is with multiple cores, so these are all, I should mention that each one of these points is, quote, the same hardness against a GPU attacker. Technically, you might be able to be faster on the slower side, the smaller side. So like 16 or 32, 64K. Those might be not enough cache hard to, push GPUs into doing memory lookups. I forgot to mention that earlier. So, minimum settings for password hashing. You should aim for being GPU being at most 10,000 hashes per second per GPU. And that's not like just any GPU. The best GPU for password cracking at the time, which currently is RTX 3080 12 gigabyte version. There's 2. There's one with 10, which is slightly older, whatever. But so when you put in settings for bscrypt with P1, P2, and P4, it takes roughly 1 millisecond to get to the minimum strength that you should have. So basically, this means that we can push well beyond and make GPU cracking really, really slow. So if you're familiar with bcrypt, cost 15 is ridiculously high. It takes a very long time to generate one of those hashes. But basically, the equivalent settings for bscrypt to hit less than 85 hashes per second per GPU, I ran this benchmark. As you can see, I guess it doesn't really help too much going with a 4th thread, even though it's a quad core. But you can get under 100 milliseconds on this CPU's like 7 years old, so it's not even that new. So it's definitely good, because usually your maximum time to do a password hashing algorithm is 100 milliseconds. You don't really want to go much higher than that. But with this, you know, well, technically, if you're doing this on a server, you wouldn't want to use parallelism, because the parallelism is actually going to lower your throughput. So if you measure with all your cores doing it, and then, you know, you're like, okay, it takes 100 milliseconds. Well, that means your server can only authenticate 10 users at a time, per second. Anyway. Questions? That was, I definitely skipped something. I don't know what happened. Because I was running overtime before when I was...
Yeah, well, that was that was ahead of schedule.
I don't know what happened.
Yeah, questions for Steve? Or is everybody totally clear with this?
Any thoughts on performance against an FPGA or ASIC accelerated attacker?
Yes. So the question was performance versus FPGA or ASIC attacker. So with FPGAs, there's this one, I forget what it's called, but it basically, it's 4 FPGAs on a board. You can only get them used. They're like $200 used, but so bcrypt on it is really nice and fast because of the onboard cache on it. Well, that cache is limiting how many units of bcrypt can be running at the same time on that FPGA. Well, that's only 4K. If you were doing 256K, you would then be 64th the speed, 1/64th the speed. So that would drop it well below GPUs. And then I assume ASICs are similar. But also no one's using ASICs.
Question from me, Steve. Let's be paranoid. Do we have reasons to believe that specialized government agencies in unnamed countries could have specialized CPUs that are not generally known or available, that can be in existence today, that have either incredibly large cache sizes or also can deal with the memory hard or the cache hard problem?
Yes, but you're not worried. I'm not worried about them. No one really should be. You should be worried about some kid with a GPU, like.
And the team Hashcat, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
Some kid that gets a GPU for Christmas, and then ooh, I can crack passwords. That's really.
Any more questions for Steve? Nope. Okay. Well, then thank you, Steve. And we are finished a little bit early, but the last talk of the day, why kids couldn't care less about your password advice, is at 6 o'clock. I would really recommend that one as well. See you back then.